When you're ready.
Great. Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Arie Belldegrun, who's a major stakeholder in the LA bioscience ecosystem and a critical advocate of LA Best. Arie is the executive chair and co-founder of Allogene Therapeutics, co-founder and senior managing director of Vita Ventures, chair of Bellco Capital, co-chair of Breakthrough Properties, and Roy and Carol Dumani, chair in urologic oncology at UCLA David Geffen School of Medicine. Arie, please introduce your Meet the Leaders in the Business of Life Sciences panel and look forward to your discussion.
Thank you, Mark. Hello and good afternoon. I'm Arie Belldegrun, and I would like to welcome you all to this most exciting panel of Meet the Leaders in the Business of Life Science. I've been on the UCLA faculty for the past 3 decades. And as such, I had the opportunity to watch the institution transforming to a true entrepreneurial life science ecosystem. And based on the new startups coming out from greater LA, it's clear that other academic institutions in town are experiencing the same trend. As you heard, I'm also the proud holder of the Roy Dumani Chair in Urologic Oncology at UCLA. Roy was not only the ultimate entrepreneur, but more importantly, was a passionate advocate for advancing life science at UCLA. Roy was among many other initiatives, created the highly popular course here for graduate students called The Business of Science. 2 years ago, we held a special eulogy for Roy at the opening of this conference. Today, we have assembled an outstanding group of true life science superstars, 2 cutting-edge pharma leaders, and 2 biotech CEOs and innovators. In fact, 3 of the group started their careers as academicians and professors at major institutions, and then transitioned to industry and to a more entrepreneurial environment. We'll try to learn today from their own experience. This topic of academic industry relationships is recently gaining momentum and will be discussed also today. Just last month, Levi and I participated in a first of its kind and quite an historic session from AACR called Embracing Entrepreneurship in Cancer Research. It was initiated by one of our own, Tony Ribas, while serving as AACR president. Feedbacks were very positive, and requests to repeat it next year were there for us. So you can see the excitement around the topic of today. So with that in mind, let's get started with self-introductions. Maybe we'll start with Daphne.
Sorry, needed to unmute. Hi, my name is Daphne Kohler, and I, as Arie said, started my career as an academic. In fact, an academic in a field that's maybe different from many of you. As a computer scientist, I was one of the early entrants into the field of machine learning in the early 90s as it was becoming a field. And I was the first machine learning hire into Stanford's computer science department back in 1995. I became interested in the life sciences as initially an area of application for machine learning in the late 90s as the first maybe slightly higher throughput ways of measuring biology were starting to emerge, like first the early microarrays, then the human genome, and so on. And then over time developed an interest in machine learning for life sciences in its own right, and ended up having a bifurcated existence at Stanford where half my lab did core computer science and the other half did biology. And my biology friends didn't even realize I was a computer scientist and vice versa. It was interesting. I eventually left academia, and we'll come back to that later, for the purpose of having more impact on the world. And initially that was to pursue a passion project unrelated to my research. It was in technology-assisted education. I'm the co-founder of a company called Coursera, which is one of the largest education platforms in the world. And then in 2016, wanted to come back and do science and really bring together the fields of machine learning and life science in a much more fundamental way. So spent a period at Calico learning from some really great leaders. And in 2018, set off on my own to found a new company called Insitro, which aims to rethink how we do drug discovery and development using machine learning as a fundamental technology for unblocking some of the major challenges that we encounter, and hopefully using predictive models to increase the probability of success and reduce timelines of some of the programs that we're taking on. So we're a drug discovery and development company. We don't build tools, and we're just looking to do it in a very different way. And Arie, now you're muted now.
Sorry. Thank you. Christy, a little bit before your time, David and I tried to recruit Daphne to LA. It didn't work. Somebody else at Calico took her. So our loss. But Christy, please.
Yes, for sure. My name is Christy Shaw. I'm the CEO of Kite now, backfilling big, huge shoes that I'll never fill from Arie. But how did I get into this industry? You know, in the 29 years my mom was alive, she taught me a lot about philanthropy. She died at age 51 of breast cancer. And my father was a businessman. And it's been my life's passion to ensure that patients get access to the therapies that they need when they need them. Because I learned, unfortunately, that had my mother gotten access to aromatase inhibitors, she would have lived longer. And so as I look at the mission we have for Kite to focus on the cure, which we continue to have that mission, how we get these therapies, the potential to cure somebody is so critically important. And right now today, only 4 out of 10 patients in the communities that are eligible for CAR therapy that have diffuse large B-cell lymphoma actually get access to it, even know about it or are referred to get it. So it's my passion to make sure that these breakthroughs become common and for all patients to access.
Christy, thank you so much. You know, if we all have something in common, all the speakers already, even before introduction, is patience. And thanks for reminding us. Levi.
Thanks, Arie. It's a real pleasure to be a part of this panel. So I'm Levi Garaway, and I did all of my training in 11 years of faculty in the Harvard system. And actually, I went down the path that I'm on originally because of another patient and family member. My father was diagnosed with prostate cancer, aggressive form of prostate cancer, when I was still a student, still an MD PhD student. And so that's a big reason that I, and also one of my sisters, who happens to be in the same department with Arie, Isla, we both went into cancer research as a career. So, but 11 years on the faculty at Dana-Farber, Harvard Medical School, part of the Broad Institute, wonderful years, and had a chance to do a lot of work in cancer genetics, cancer genomics, and to be a founder of a cancer precision medicine center at Harvard. Also had the opportunity to co-found a couple of companies before making the jump to industry myself, one of which is Foundation Medicine, which is now part of the Roche Group. The other is a company called Tang Therapeutics, which is still alive and well in Cambridge. So I guess it was not surprising that at some point I would get the bug, and it certainly happened that at some point in my career I felt what I needed to do was to try to have a different impact, different kind of therapeutic impact, and the appeal of industry was particularly exciting. Had a chance to in 2016 made the decision to jump to Eli Lilly, where eventually I ran oncology research and development. And then in 2019, had a really exciting opportunity to come to Roche and Genentech, where I run global product development, and I'm also the chief medical officer. So very pleased to be here.
Thank you so much, Levi. David?
Thank you, and thanks for having me in this panel. I'm David Chang, CEO and co-founder of Allogene Therapeutics, which is a company that is located in the Bay Area. It's a clinical stage company that is advancing allogeneic CAR T therapy candidates across both hematologic as well as solid tumor indications. I grew up in a family where education was emphasized, typical Asian, South Korean family where everything was study, study, study. So I continued that path and trained as a physician scientist, specialized in medical oncology. And I guess Levi, we crossed paths at some different time at Dana-Farber. And I do have a connection with UCLA, which is where I studied my academic career in the Department of Medicine and MIMG. And some 20 years ago, I moved to industry, initially at Amgen, which was a company at the time that was undergoing transition from biotechnology to a biopharmaceutical company, also moving into the therapeutics area where my interest sort of intersected. So I spent a good 12 years at Amgen learning everything about drug development and still learning, as well as learning something about how to properly position the drug to be used once, if we are fortunate enough to get the drug approved for marketing. I continued that for some time until 2014 when I moved to then an emerging small biotech, a company called Kite Pharma, that Arie at the time was the CEO. And there we were fortunate to be in many ways at the right place at the right time, and also having the fortitude and perseverance to stay with the development of what was KT-C19 back then, which now is marketed by Kite Pharma as Yescarta. And I'm continuing that journey in the biotech sector, now, running a, biotech company, but also getting involved in studying a new company and also working as a board or scientific advisor to several companies such as Iconavir, Notch Therapeutics, Kronos Bio, Eminix. So in many ways, what started as a life of just study, and I'm at what I would consider to be somewhat different place in the current state.
Thank you, David. I'm told today that we have over 1,100 listeners or participants. We are just the third out of 4 years since we initiated the effort. Last year, we didn't hold any meeting, but we started with few hundred. Now we are 1,100. I'm sure that many of the audience are students, graduate students, PhD students, and so on. And I'm sure that not all of them are grasping the whole excitement of AI, biotech, life science. I asked the team, maybe you can give us an example of an exciting project that you are currently involved to give us the flavor. What are you doing at some of the days when you go to the office? So maybe we'll start, Christy. You have so much on your plate right now with so many drugs approval. What is the most exciting part of your job today?
So two things. One is on the commercial side, which I talked about, and one is on the pipeline side. So on the commercial side, it's basically getting patients access, like I talked about. People ask me, what about the business keeps me up at night? And that's the biggest thing, that nobody should die without giving a chance at cell therapy if they're eligible. So that is most of my brain of how do we do that. The second equal part is we've had a lot of launches in different types of lymphoma. The most important one is coming up very soon, within weeks, and that is second line Zuma-7. This isn't just important to Kite or Gilead. It's extremely important to patients. We can double the size of the number of patients that we can treat. And even more importantly, I think it's going to be historic for the industry to have cell therapy in the second line treatment when a patient is much healthier, the cells are healthier, and being able to get a patient a chance before they have to go through many more different types of products that could bear on the quality of their life to be receptive to cell therapy in the future. So that is the biggest thing that we have going on in the cell therapy industry, in my opinion, and that's coming up very soon. You're on mute, Arie.
Thank you, Christy. Levi, what is exciting? I think everything is exciting at Genentech, but what's most exciting for you specifically coming in from a different institution?
Yeah, great. Well, actually, one of the things that was always a highlight of my week when I was in academia was when we would have our group meeting and one of the trainees of the group would present their projects. And I feel like that we have, it's the same kind of thing every week, often more than once a week. There's something being presented. The difference is that it's often now results from a patient study or that require a decision. And so that's, so I get the spirit of that kind of discovery, but it's now very much patient impact. So I thoroughly enjoy that. One area that for us has been very interesting has been in the area of bispecific antibodies. So for example, CD20, CD3 bispecifics, we actually have two such molecules that they're both active as single agents, but they have distinct clinical profiles, which means that they may have benefits sort of across the range of patient considerations in terms of indolent versus aggressive heme malignancies, as well as where patients might encounter care and whether they have the ability to be treated at a tertiary care center or not. So that's an exciting area, not just to see the activity as single agents, but also in various combinations from other members of our pipeline and portfolio for heme malignancies. And we have other bispecific antibodies against different targets that are showing promise as well. So that's one example of particularly exciting data evolving very quickly.
Thank you. Daphne, what excites you these days?
So one of the things that drove our vision at insitro is that while machine learning is a wonderful tool, it's really only as good as the data that you feed it. And if you have crappy data, you're going to get crappy output. And it's really important to have as your starting point for discovery, whether it's on the biological discovery or the chemical design, really high quality data set. So at a high level, one of the things that are exciting to me in terms of our work at insitro is that as we develop additional capabilities for measuring biology, both at the cellular level, at the human level, and also in the chemistry, all of a sudden it unlocks opportunities to develop machine learning models that are considerably, hugely more powerful than anything that we could have done before. Because if you have bad data, the model, actually you're better off using simple, weak models because the rich, expressive models are just going to dive in and latch onto artifacts that are meaningless from a biological perspective. So that is at the meta level, is just the wealth of technological advancements that are made available to all of us as a community as a way of generating very large amounts of biological and chemical data. As one specific project within that scope that I'm particularly excited about is our work that we did actually with Gilead, Christy, on NASH. And one of the things that we believe strongly is that genetically validated targets are ones that are much, much more likely to succeed. The data support that across, historical norms quite consistently. But in many complex diseases, the genetics are really hard to understand and unravel. unravel because the connection between your genetic variation and clinical outcome is quite weak and often hard to disentangle. What we've discovered in our work in interpreting some of the clinical trial data that we got in our partnership with Gilead is that when you take a machine learning look at the high content data that's collected from human patients, histopathology specifically in the case that we were working on, all of a sudden you are able to ascribe much more clear biological impact and in fact uncover genetic variants that are otherwise completely hidden. So for example, we were able to uncover what I believe are the first genetic drivers of NASH fibrotic progression. And that is from a relatively small but high quality data set of in a NASH clinical trial. So those are some of the things that to my mind, are a proof point that machine learning combined with data of the right quality can really unlock new biological insights and potentially give us new starting points for therapeutics.
Thank you. David?
Yeah, as I'm listening to this, I mean, I think, one thing that I would say is this is an exciting time to be in biotechnology sector, period. I mean, I'm thinking about when I started my fellowship back in the late, I guess late 1980s or early 1990s. I remember having a sort of discussion, with the fellows and, fellowship directors about whether 5-fluorouracil, which was being widely used in colorectal cancer, whether it is providing any benefit. And also as time goes on, in oncology especially, there was a time period when a lot of hype about making cancer as a chronic disease that you can manage. But now in 2020, I think everybody who are treating cancer, they are looking not just to manage the cancer, but curing cancer, which is something that in the early days, people, medical oncologists and hematologists are simply were afraid to use the word cure. So in many ways, it's a very exciting time. Christy talked a little bit about what the chimeric antigen receptor therapy is doing, which is really revolutionary in many ways, basically curing patients who are in late refractory stage. And what the Allogene is trying to do is continue to sort of expand the field of chimeric antigen receptor by advancing the field into the allogeneic, where you can use the cells from the healthy donors, or potentially in the future, cells from the inducible pluripotent stem cells to generate the cell product. And we a few days ago, announced our initial data of allogeneic as a proof of concept using the healthy donors. And what we saw with the allogeneic cell approach is that it is reproducing many of the positive aspects of the autologous CAR T therapy, definitely paving the path forward. So from that perspective, what really gets me excited is that one day, even for refractory advanced cancer, we can come up with a treatment modality that can lead to a cure. And certainly right now, therapies like bispecifics and chimeric antigen receptor therapies, that's really paving the way. So, this whole idea of merging all the learnings that we have from the cancer research over the last 25 years and being able to apply to how we are developing drugs. I mean, that's, I have to say that's one of the most exciting things that gets me up every morning.
Thanks, David. That's perfect for kind of the next set of questions, which is, again, what's next in drug development? What are the hottest and up-and-coming research areas and opportunities for drug development in the next, let's see, 5-10 years, specifically for the younger team that wants to jump in to an exciting and what you believe is the next generation technology to lead to progress in different diseases. Levi, you're sitting there in the hub. Can you talk a little bit about the kind of the future that you believe that in the research that's coming up?
Sure. So a couple of areas that I see that are quite exciting. On the discovery side, the nexus of high throughput experimentation, even at the single cell perturbation level, and the massive compute power and analytical power that we now have. Aviv Regev, who recently joined Gilead, that's something that she came to do. And I think the potential there for a whole range, from target discovery to small molecule and biologics discovery modalities, et cetera, the ability to bring that forward. I think some of this resonates with what Daphne said earlier. So that's on the discovery side. On the development side, there's something similar, leveraging AI, machine learning approaches to discern subgroups of patients that might be most likely to benefit from various types of therapeutic intervention, also to inform new indications, line extensions, rational therapeutic combinations. So we have an effort that we, under the rubric of what we call personalized healthcare, that's designed to deploy those kinds of approaches to the data, the clinical data that we collect, the real world data that we increasingly have access to, and hopefully there will be insights that emerge from those kinds of interrogations that can feed both backward to discovery and forward to deployment of therapeutics in the healthcare ecosystems around the world. So those are two areas. But I should say, I mentioned areas that touch on machine learning and computational, but actually, for those of you who maybe didn't have a chance to learn to code along the way, like me, you don't have to feel left out, because there's nothing like a deep understanding of good old-fashioned disease biology to figure out what questions to ask, what the opportunities are. So it's a partnership.
Yeah. Daphne, it looks like everybody's so excited about AI. What are you looking at the future of this space of machine learning and AI?
So Levi stole half my answer, and so I'm going to agree with him as the first half of my answer, which is I think that there is an incredible opportunity at the intersection of what you might call high throughput cell biology, bioengineering on the one hand, and the tools of machine learning and data science on the other, to really interrogate biology in whole new ways. I think we have gotten a lot of mileage from the targets that we all already know and love, but I think there is a whole slew of additional biologies that are only now starting to come to light. The only way that we would really be able to gain the relevant insights into biologies that are novel and meaningfully modulate human disease is by collecting a lot of data that really gives the ability to gain insight into these subtle patterns that are involved in some of the more complex human diseases of large unmet need, like, for example, diseases of the neuroscience. I think in order to do that, collecting data is one facet, but only useful insofar as we can really make use of it. Left to their own devices, humans boil down these oceans of data to really narrow, simple patterns that the human mind can encompass. And I think machine learning really has the ability to unlock much more subtle patterns that will often give rise to, I think, hopefully more actionable targets, combination therapies, and so on, which I think are going to be essential in some of these complex polygenic diseases. The other answer I was going to give is that there's been an unbelievable resurgence in the development of new therapeutic modalities. Cell therapies, of course, are well represented in this group here, but there's many other modalities that are now coming into their own. RNA therapeutics of different oligotherapeutics more broadly, various bispecifics of different types. And what I find exciting about that from a machine learning perspective is that the tools that for each of those, there is a set of low-hanging fruit targets that these unlock immediately. But I think there is a tremendous opportunity to innovate on the design of those therapeutic modalities to unlock a much broader and deeper set of targets. And it's areas where people don't have the same wealth of expertise as they might have for modalities that are more established. In a partnership between chemists and data science experts, I think could potentially greatly accelerate our ability to make use of those new therapeutic modalities and allow them to treat a broader range of targets faster. So to me, trying to come at this design question from a machine learning angle offers a tremendous potential as well.
Okay, Christy, I thought that everybody will say engineering the human immune system is where things are going. But I see we are in the minority, Christy. Maybe you can support me here. What do you think?
So I do, it is the manufacturing piece is the therapy, right? So I think for us as at Kite, one of the biggest things that we're focused on is the science of manufacturing cell therapy. And there's literally hundreds of steps, as you know, to getting this re-engineered T cell to and from and to, I should say, the patient. And so for us, we have a couple of manufacturing sites, one just opened in Amsterdam last year, but also one in Maryland that is pretty far along. That's going to help us with the automation piece of how do we make this a lot easier, a lot less expensive, so more can do it. And that includes how do we really leverage some of the science and advancements that people like David are making in allogeneic. How do we do this look at things internally from our perspective, but also ensure that we're partnering externally to advance the science and be a part of the solution when they come forward. So it's really trying to get things that we have better and partner externally for a lot of the newer innovations, but also the newer, as somebody told me once, I said, I'm not very creative when I was more junior. And I said, because I take other people's ideas and make them better. And they said, that is creative. So I'll steal that one and say, what we're trying to do too is say, hey, 50% of patients are living longer with CAR T therapy with diffuse large B-cell lymphoma and some of the other lymphomas, but why aren't the other 50%? So our ability to take the commercial patients who we have thousands of now, take that data, look at real world evidence, look at translational data to try to really pick out who are the patients that are going to have adverse events that we can be ready for them and shouldn't go to the outpatient, but should stay inpatient. Who are the patients that, are going to respond the best? Why is that? Who are they? And identify them. And then also going to other areas like we submitted an IND earlier this year for AML. We expect a new indication for Tecartus at the end of the year for ALL. So really making sure that we're getting the most that we can out of for the most patients that we can out of the science we know today as well. And really look to external biotech small companies to partner with for a lot of the future pieces.
Great. Thanks so much for bringing up the manufacturing, the art of manufacturing. I hope that we'll have some time to go back to discuss it, but that's really critical in a new science. David?
Yeah, so, I think the original question is, what is the area that I see as the most exciting? I mean, I think everything is exciting, but I personally, am leaning more towards a cell and gene therapy. And this again goes back to what I was saying. I mean, I think we are at a unique point in the in the history of medicine. I mean, if you think about how we treat the disease over the entire history, it's always treating the symptoms. I mean, not the underlying cause. And as we learn more about the biology of the disease, and this is where machine learning, and I think it will, even, accelerate, how we learn about the disease, not just the monogenic disorders, but, disorders that, is outcome of a collection of many different, defects or variations, I should say. I think, so we sort of go through this phase where we identify a nodal points or some important protein, and we try to interdict the functions of those proteins, such as EGF receptor, HER2, or you name some of those targets. KRAS, I think, is another one that's emerging as an important target. However, I think when I sort of think about what the future may look like, I'm still coming down to we have an opportunity to correct those things, so it becomes more like a surgical, precision therapy that one-time treatment can result in a much more permanent outcome rather than a situation where you have to continue to give the therapy. I mean, I hate taking medications. I should never say that as somebody in the pharmaceutical industry, and I much rather have the problem taken care of, so that I don't have to worry about it. So when I think about this is a concept of synthetic biology that utilizes gene engineering, gene editing, viral or non-viral method of gene delivery. So much is happening in this area. And, that's what gets me excited, potential of what this field can do as well as speed of innovation that's really making this cellular and gene therapy even more excited over the last 5-10 years. Arie, you're muted.
I find myself many times asked by young scientists who really want to pursue career, and they said, what direction should I take for my graduate studies? For me, I said, go study neuroscience. I have not heard anything here in that direction, but maybe anybody want to jump in. Think of one area that you would really recommend to anybody, your son, your daughter, graduating this year from an academic institution. What should I pursue? Would I pursue AI? So how do I go there? What is that? But a direction that if anybody has some smart ideas here for the team, for the audience.
I guess my idea may not be smart because it's not specific. I've really changed my advice over the years, because it used to be you used to pick a company and you were with them for a lifetime when I was growing up. And now we know that people change not only jobs, but careers multiple times in their life. So I actually give the advice, start out in a place where you can see multiple different disciplines and you can get a taste for each one of them and see which one that you're drawn to so that you can have that exposure. And we do try to do that as we've started this partnership with UCLA and our internships to be able to expose more students to broader ranges and functions so that it helps them determine and narrow down what it is they want to do. Because sometimes it's just hard to know until you've actually experienced it.
Anybody else with some ideas?
I'm going to riff off of Christy's response and agree that the careers that we have today are ones that in many cases we couldn't even envision 10 or 20 years ago. So telling people to learn any specific body of content is probably not very useful, because that body of content will become obsolete in a decade, if not less. What I think is really important, in addition to what Christy said of exploring a range of options, is to focus on core foundational skills that will serve you in many of the disciplines that you choose to undertake. So that includes critical thinking skills, speaking and communication skills. In the disciplines that I'm in, and I think increasingly so, mathematical and algorithmic thinking skills as well. Those are all things that, irrespective of the job that you end up with, are likely to serve you well and will just open up opportunities across pretty much most things that you're going to want to pursue as these opportunities suddenly get created in fields that we didn't even think about.
Anybody else? Levi?
Yeah, I would agree with everything that's said. But I guess the one thing that I would add to everything, which I agree with, is, so yes, picking an area that is interesting and that you're curious and could be excited about. It's also nice, and obviously it goes without saying, although it's worth mentioning, that you then have to have a mentor. And in some ways, having a mentor who's a great scientist that you're going to now follow within the lab, that is even more important than trying to optimize for a particular area. But the other thing I would say is it's definitely helpful if you pick a track where it's clear that whatever the innovation is of the day is going to be part of bringing the advance, because then it sort of puts you in a realm where you have to think about, how do I really operate at the bleeding edge, and how do I leverage what's new, and think about the use of those things to ask different questions. That skill set and being sort of and orienting one's career so that that's always, you're not too far from that bleeding edge, whatever that bleeding edge might be. It can be helpful to think that way. And as we all know, there's a whole range of choices that you can make. Not all of them are equivalently situated in terms of being proximal to innovation, whether or not it's the use of machine learning, AI, compute power, whether it's other kinds of platforms, or even just ways of asking biological questions. I think that's the one thing I would add. But otherwise, I fully agree with what's been said.
Okay, David, anything else? So I can move to the next question.
Nothing much to add. I mean, I think it really, as I'm listening, and because I had exactly the same kind of response, it really comes down to, think about skating to where the puck is going rather than where a puck is. I mean, so, having so focused early in my career about certain things, if there's one thing that I would do a little bit differently, I would definitely sort of pay a lot more attention to what others are doing, not just what you are doing. And, certainly the field is more right now, it's an interdisciplinary science. I mean, just knowing what you're doing is just a piece of the puzzle. How to integrate what others are doing, together, and then creating, putting all those things together. I think, that I believe will become more and more important as time goes on. Things are getting so complex. There's no single science that will address what we need to do.
Okay, thank you. I'm looking at all the questions. We are getting so many questions on kind of the business side. Maybe we'll try to cover it a bit later. But as a transition to the business, David, as I have you already, you are you are sitting at the top of your career as a professor, NIH grants. Your career is advancing very quickly. What makes you immediately, at one day, from day to day, move to, as you said, to Amgen and be part of a big organization and learning things that are completely new? What made you, and what's the steps that required, and can you describe for us the process?
Yeah, I mean, I get asked that question, from time to time. When I sort of think about it, I mean, it really is not a single step, like, all the things that most of you would undergo. It's sort of a gradual step. And I think it's sort of a, sort of evolution of how one thinks about what they want to do, as well as sort of realizing what they're good and what they're bad at. I mean, I think initially, I was all about learning science and medicine. And then interest sort of shifted. And as I shifted my interest, I also, enjoyed what I was doing, which initially was learning the development side of, pharmaceutical industry, how to properly identify the use of the potential drug, and then guiding it through the development plan that will allow the evidence generation that will be required for the registration of the drug. And as you do that, the life is not just about, developing a drug. I mean, you got to think about how it will be used in a market, space, and also work together with other functions in the pharmaceutical industry, especially the commercial side, to generate additional evidence to allow more wider use of the drug and more wider and proper use of the drug. So I think that's sort of a gradual step, and you continue to learn. And as you continue to learn, I mean, there are things that you like, and, also the doors open up, doors that you never thought that you would walk through. And this is really, what I'm sort of doing now, which is being a more of an entrepreneur than a scientist. And so, that took probably about 20 years gradually. And I don't think there is a one, time point that would say, I'm taking my hat off as a scientist and I'm putting a hat as an entrepreneur. It doesn't happen like that. It's a gradual step. And also along the way, I mean, you got to follow your heart, and you got to, do what gets you up. If you're not passionate about what you're doing, you will not be successful.
Levi, you agree? You have some other part of the story other than the passion and the gradual process? Was it from day to day? How did you make a decision?
No, I fully agree.
An offer came, you couldn't refuse, or what?
No, I fully agree with David. I mean, obviously, we can talk about the specific opportunity that led me to jump to industry, but I think actually the deeper point that David is making is the critical one, which is that at any given point in one's career, like I wasn't planning even a few months before I ultimately made the jump. I had no plans to make any jump. I was doing what I enjoyed doing, and my goal was to be as good at it, and I had exciting things, direct research directions to chase, and I was consumed with the chasing and making discoveries, and going back in time, same kind of thing. And I know it sounds kind of it might sound kind of trite, but in the end, you have to sort of start with, all right, what are the opportunities? What do I enjoy? And hopefully it's what do I enjoy and what am I good at? And you immerse yourself in it. And if you immerse yourself in it and you give your whole heart to it and you work incredibly hard, good things are going to happen. I mean, it's some of it is luck, but a lot of it is, good things happen. And so, and you don't really have to overthink it because opportunities will come your way. And then, periodically you take a look and say, oh, am I happy, or do I want to jump, or do I want to stay? And so that's kind of how it happened. And that's how it happened for me when the opportunity, so a particular opportunity came in a moment in time. And at that moment I thought, yeah, I've been successful, but I'm ready to try something new. But 2 years before or 2 years later, it might've been different. So I agree. You have to do what you love. Hopefully you're also good at it, because that's the connection that requires success, and you work hard.
Great. Daphne, anything to add here? You have a different perspective coming from a completely different industry.
Yeah, no, I did make the jump to a completely different industry. And I would say that whereas the stories that we've heard here are maybe more of a pull, as in an opportunity that suddenly presented itself, from my perspective, it was a combination of a push and a pull. So even while I was a professor, I guess I felt like I wanted to have a more immediate impact on the lives of people, and not just write papers that hopefully someone will read and make use of, and hopefully touch the lives of patients some other time. And I tried to do that from within my role as an academic, and found only somewhat mixed success in not maybe having the immediacy of the impact that one gets when you actually build something. So the reason when the departure from academia was actually precipitated by an opportunity that presented itself, which was the Coursera opportunity, where the work that I'd done actually at Stanford created these hundreds of thousands of people taking courses online for free. And I felt like that was just such an incredible opportunity to make an impact on the world, on hundreds of thousands. At this point, is over 70 million people all over the world in a matter of a few months. It felt like it wasn't something that I could pass up, because I'd had that initial push, if you will, that I really wanted to go and do something that had more of an immediate impact. And then when I started doing it, you kind of become addicted to impact. So it's not the kind of thing that I was like, okay, been there, done that, 2 years, I can go back to write some more papers. I wanted to continue doing that. And so I basically turned what was supposed to be a 2-year leave of absence into a permanent departure. And, am using the time that I have left to really try and make a dent in the universe, to quote Steve Jobs.
Well, Christy, you had the best story or example of why you went to the pharmaceutical world, which is really emotional. Have you considered other opportunities, or it was very clear that the pharma world is where you are starting to make an impact? You're on mute.
I feel very lucky that where I started is actually where I keep choosing to stay. And I agree with, Levi's thoughts on your passion. My passion has always been for the patients, and it's only grown deeper with family issues. And so as I followed the career path in pharma, culminating in my experience in Novartis Oncology, when I took a step down because my sister had multiple myeloma, and she had the possibility of having CAR T treatment, and she needed a caregiver. And in doing that, I was off for a year and wasn't sure I'd actually ever come back. I didn't really know what my plans were, except I was in the I was in the luxury seat of being able to do that for her, which many people can't financially, but also being able to see the whole healthcare system from the point of view of a patient and walking with her side by side, that how difficult it is for any patient to get through the US system in healthcare. I don't know how patients do it that don't have access or knowledge about the healthcare system. So what ended up happening, unfortunately, she passed away, but what ended up happening is it increased my passion for coming back. And a couple of reasons. One is to make sure that I take that learning and bring it forward and try to overcome those obstacles and be able to be that voice. But also to show people that it's okay if you leave your role, regardless of what it is, and go do what you love most, or care for the people you love most. Because the biggest thing that came to me when I left my job was all of the emails that I received, LinkedIn, people I didn't even know, personal emails about people who regretted not making that decision and wish that they had. And so for me, I also wanted to show it's okay. You can make that decision and you can come back. It may not be the same role, but there will be something for you. So that passion for the patient and people has only deepened over the years. And I've been able to make a choice to come back versus feeling like, is this really what I want to do? So thank you for asking.
Sure, that's great. Here is a question which is related for the panel from the audience. How did you learn the business side? What were some of the challenges you faced not having business training? How can somebody start jumping into the business? David?
So I'm still learning, so I'm not the right one to answer that question. But
we are all learning.
I would say, have a mentor, and it's always, easier and quicker to stand on the shoulders of a giant and trying to become a giant. So having a mentor and, sort of learning from others. And I think this is something that, would do very well to have that understanding early on in your career. I mean, I think the entire education, especially in a science sector, it's always, excel on your own. That is sort of the, what I grew up in. But, as I sort of venture out to different side, I'm learning that at the end, it's always the teamwork, always working with others and assembling, right group of people. And I think, that is the critical. So, the question about, the business side, I mean, how are you going to learn that? I don't think even if you go to business school, they tell you everything that's needed to, how to create and how to be successful in a pharmaceutical industry. I mean, that's where, people who have done it in the past, and learning from that becomes important. And, like anything else, it's at some point you have to understand that, textbook can only take you to a certain point. After that, you're on your own and you sort of learn from others. And in that setting, always having mentor or mentors will do you, great things.
Thanks, Daphne. That's very relevant for you as a first-time CEO jumping into an area that it's lonely at the top. So how are you managing that?
Well, actually, I'm a second-time CEO because of Coursera, but your point still stands because not at that point, not only had I never built a company, I'd never been at a company, I'd been a lifelong academic. So I couldn't even tell you what a one-on-one was and how that's different from, a research meeting with one's grad students. So definitely a very, very steep learning curve. I completely agree with David that it's, you need to learn from others. Having a mentor is great, but I would also say one of the hard-learned lessons for me was building a senior team around you of people who can complement you in the areas that you don't have the necessary strengths and skills. And so one of the most important things that you could do as you're going into any kind of new senior role is to hire people who are really, really strong. And there's this old adage that I 100% believe in, that A's hire A's, and that you should be trying to hire people who are better than you are, certainly better than you are at what they do. Because otherwise you're just going to drag the entire team down. The other thing I'd like to say is that one of the humbling realizations that I had as I worked with some of the people that I most admire at Coursera and also at Calico is that even leaders make mistakes. Even really experienced, seasoned leaders make mistakes. And while it shouldn't be something that we aspire to do, and we should always try and avoid that, you shouldn't beat yourself up every time you make a mistake. It's not the case that there's this perfect CEO who will just every single time do the exact right thing. And the important thing is to pick yourself up, admit that you've made a mistake, figure out how to fix it, take your team with you on the journey, and move on to help address whatever it is that went wrong. Because no, even very experienced leaders are not perfect. So there's no silver bullet.
Levi, any words of wisdom here? You have started companies, you have jumped to the big pharma. So any comparables there?
Yeah, I like the question. And I think it's also instructive because it can imply that somehow there's this, business lingo or stuff that you have to learn, and only then will you be successful. But actually, at least in this sort of R&D forum, the first principle here is that we are in the business of science. And the business case, which is one of the terms that I learned when I got to industry, is built on the science first and foremost. So I would say, don't shortchange the critical thinking, the rigor around the science, whether it's disease biology or approaches or models or whatever it is. That's the first principle. Now, having said that, for me, one of the big revelations when I got to industry was you get there and then you start talking to your commercial colleagues and you realize what unmet need really looks like. And when I came out of academia, I sort of thought, oh, hey, so-and-so's got a really cool molecule. It's like, yeah, that doesn't matter. What do the patients need? Actually, not just what do they need today. What are they going to need in 5 to 7 years when the medicine's approved? That's the unmet need. That's the bar we're going for. And I thought, whoa, that's a whole different way of approaching the question. But it was so valuable because, talking about, I can't remember who made the comment about the Steve Jobs dent in the universe. It was Christy, I guess. Or maybe was it David? I can't remember who made it. Anyway, but that's impact. And but still, it's rooted in the science and then the disease and what the diseases need. So you haven't gotten to any business yet. And then finally, the last part, I think actually David said it well, you do your homework. I mean, you're not going to be able to take a crash course, but you're sitting in meetings. There are pre-reads, there are slide decks. And what I would do is, I would spend hours in the days coming up to a meeting of, oncology business meeting, reviewing the decks and trying to figure out what the heck is going on with all these numbers and ask questions of everything. So when you get there, you're like, hey, I'm going to participate. I'm going to learn this. And you just have to decide, hey, I'm going to be curious and leverage whatever resources I have at my disposal to kind of get caught up, get up to speed. And then it just sort of happens over time. But there's no course you can go off and take to prepare. You just have to learn it over time. But it starts with the science.
Yeah. Christy, you are overseeing now 2,700 employees, as the last I know. And do you think in order to sit there, you must have a MBA to learn the business, or is it enough to surround yourself with the best brains and they help you doing the job? What do you think from your sitting there high up?
I'd say the latter is more important because as Daphne said earlier, things change so rapidly that you can't keep up with everything. And even if you were deep in the science at one point, if you're the CEO, you've gotten out of it because you've been distracted by 12 other functions. And now the science has evolved and you have to go learn it again. So for sure, I think having that team that is better than you, than what they do. And I could tell you, Levi was really good, by the way, at the business discussions when I was around him at Lilly. Very good. So now I know your secret. But I was just thinking when you guys were talking about the business, it was the opposite for me. I went into a field that was highly scientific, and I'm an MBA. Now, I will say I'm an MBA, but here's how I did it. I went to undergraduate school at Iowa State, and then I got my MBA at night when I was a sales rep. And all I was wanting to do was get that piece of paper. But what did it do for me? I think the big thing in MBA school is that you do these team group projects, which is very difficult to get people together. It's very difficult to, beginning with your calendars, getting input, getting your piece done, getting it all together. But that is corporate America of how you collaborate cross-functionally. And, as I've learned in cell therapy, there's no greater team sport that's required than cell therapy when you have manufacturing talking to commercial on a daily basis, which never happens in big pharma. You don't even know who those people are. So for me, I've had to surround myself with people who are scientific, that, heads of research, head of clinical development are always my right and left hand. And I try to do what Levi does, and that is really learn the science as much as I can. And you and I, Arie, had discussions about that, about what do I learn first? How fast do I need to learn it? And as I'm trying to also focus on the other functions to get that therapy to patients. So it's reverse for me, but I'd say the same holds true about how you surround yourself with great people that want to focus on things like curing cancer.
That's fascinating. Obviously, we can continue to talk about it quite a lot. Let's move on to a little bit to harness the best practices in biotech. David, with all of that, is it enough to just surround yourself with the people like we heard here, or there is something else? How important is the CEO role in conducting the symphony? Do you read only the notes, or you need to do more than that in order to direct the company in the right way? Because as I said before, you always find as a CEO, it's lonely at the top. You can get a lot of advices, but unless you understand the science, the clinical, the implication, what will happen in 5-7 years, as everybody's saying here, it's not going to happen. Give us a little bit insight about what keeps you at night with your 300 employees. David?
Yeah, 300 employees. I mean, you're talking about 300 extremely well-trained, very intelligent employees, who have their own view. When you are running a company, it's, not just the individual, but, collective contribution of all your employees that will make the company either successful or not. So here, I think as a leader, the first thing that one has to come to realize is, part of your job is listening, and creating an environment where different views are accepted and discussed. And I think this is one thing that I learned from Arie. It's like advice. You take advice from as many people as possible. At some point, you're going to have to make a decision. And, you will make a decision, but, engage people and seek advice before you make the, decision. And, there are business books written about how to make decisions. So this is not an easy topic, but think about, what you have to do as a leader, because at the end, that's what CEOs will have to do. At some point, when there are different views, you will have to adjudicate and you will have to make a decision. And as you do that, one thing that's also important is, clarify what you, not as a CEO, but you, meaning the company, is trying to do. And having a common goal, the shared goal, there's nothing better than that will unite people. And when you can get the people come together, that's when the success will happen.
Thank you. Daphne, give us a little bit of an insight, AI, machine learning. How's the company looks? Do you have biologists, engineers? Do you need labs at all? Is it all in the computer? Give us a little bit of understanding what is needed for the next generation technologies in AI.
So one of the things that makes insitro, I think, unusual in this ecosystem is that it really is a hybrid company in that it has about 50-50 wet lab life scientists and 50% data scientists and engineers. Part of the vision, and it's part of vision, as you can see in the name. Insitro is really the merger of in silico and in vitro. Biology today is far too complex, I think, for us to do everything in a computer. We just don't have nearly enough understanding of the complexity of even simple biological systems to the point that we could make reliable predictions without biological data. So what we do is we have built a lab infrastructure that generates massive amounts of biological data at high fidelity and high scale so as to drive the kinds of high quality machine learning algorithms that one needs, I think, in order to be successful, rather than the compromise that many companies pursue, which is let's just collect dribs and drabs of data from here and there and hope that, but if you pile it high enough, then somehow miraculously machine learning will be able to make sense of stuff that doesn't really cohere and was never collected with machine learning in mind. So we have everything from developmental stem cell biologists who work on our iPSC-derived disease models. We have people who do genome engineering to to build cellular models that are more representative of disease. We have high-throughput chemists. We have software engineers that are as good as any that you'd find in the tech industry. And we have machine learning scientists and engineers that could have been, in many cases, were at top tech companies like Google and Facebook and elsewhere, and decided that they would much rather work on something more aspirational than selling ads online, such as curing human health. And one of the things that I'm really the proudest of is that we've taken what is usually a fairly disparate collection of very diverse skill sets, oftentimes speaking languages that are completely different with different mindsets and different jargons, and have managed to create a cohesive culture of interdisciplinary teams that work together as a single unit and actually communicate across what is typically a chasm between the sort of more engineering-oriented mindset and the more life science mindset. And to my mind, that is really at the core of what will make insitro successful more than any specific technology that we use to generate data or any specific machine learning algorithm that we develop. It's the culture and the people and that sort of mindset of we're in it together to not only come up with better solutions, but what we found is that when you put these people together and really force them to think as a single unit, they come up with different problems that we wouldn't have even thought about tackling if they hadn't been communicating with each other in this way.
So have you created your own, are you a horizontal company? Today you work on NASH because Gilead wanted to work with you. Tomorrow will come with a T-cell question and you'll work there? Or do you have some verticals that you are starting to build your own, or you don't want? You say, I'm a horizontal platform for anyone who needs anything in the AI business.
Yeah, no, we're definitely not the latter. We're building horizontal capabilities across multiple steps in the value chain. We started out with biological discovery and a genetics-driven discovery engine that uses a combination of human genetic cohorts and iPS cell-derived disease models. We're now building a second horizontal platform in molecular design that uses high-throughput chemistry data to drive machine learning models for designing new chemical entities. Over time, we plan to build out multiple horizontal capabilities, but the ultimate goal is for us to have some wholly owned and some partnered, but a lot of wholly owned programs that we would like to bring into the clinic ourselves. So in addition to the work that we're doing with Gilead on NASH, we have a partnership with BMS on ALS. We have several internal programs in both metabolism as well as in neuroscience areas. And over time, as we grow and mature as a company, we can take on more and more, but focus is really important in small companies. You try and do too much, then you become diffuse and you don't execute on anything well. So it's we want to make sure we do a few things really well before doing other things beyond that.
Thank you. Levi, you had a great, you can have the best comparison between the level of science in the academic world and the level of science in wherever it is, Genentech, definitely the most revered of the companies with great success over so many years. Do you see some, I wouldn't call it stagnation, lifers that are sitting there and start thinking differently about problems as opposed to those continuously generating new ideas in the academic world? Do you need both of them? Or, or absolutely for drug discovery, the model of Genentech is good enough?
Yeah, so I guess the way I would approach that is certainly in both. One thing that's common to both academia and industry and the science that's happening in both of those is the need to. There are some timeless elements that don't change, and then there's the need to be forward-looking and being willing to rethink, recreate yourself at points in time. The timeless elements that don't change are the critical thinking, the design, the experimental design and approaches, and rigorous decision making based on data, even though the data is often incomplete. Being able to do that well, that doesn't change. And so I think that's frankly, I think that's going to be true no matter where you are. Success, whether it's academia or industry, is going to be built on those bedrock pillars. But there's also, as you point out, over time, and the field changes rapidly. And so at points in time, you need different expertise. Sometimes that can happen by internal reinvention that can happen largely from people who are already there. Other times you have to recruit new talent. You have to recruit people who have now come of age in this new era, and then they bring those skills and capabilities into the organization. That too, by the way, is the same in academia. Sometimes you have to recruit outside your institution to have the expertise, the complement of expertise that you need. So I think there are a lot of fundamental similarities. The only difference that I point out would be that, of course, and we all know this, in academia, as long as you can write grants, you can sort of do whatever you want, unfettered research in whatever direction you want to go into. In industry, of course, you're not writing grants, but at some point, and we do have some like we at Genentech, we have a postdoc program, and there are labs that run fundamental science questions. But sooner or later, there needs to be, hey, is there a therapeutic target here? Is there a therapeutic avenue here? So there is more at some point of an applied element to the research there, but a lot of fundamental similarities in terms of how to be successful.
Thank you so much. Christy, can you give us tell us a little bit about your experience at Kite, about the scientist level, the technicians. You are sitting there at studying the CAR T, which is so hot. I'm sure that you have a lot of people who want to join the most exciting area of research today. And at the same time, employee retention problems, partners with more close academic institution here in town. Can you give us a little bit of your kind of a sense of Kite and Gilead today?
Thank you. Yes. Going from big pharma to biotech was one step where you see a lot of change in biotech. A lot of people changed companies quickly in biotech relative to big pharma. I know it's really high turnover rates in Cambridge. So first I had to get used to that this is not abnormal. But second, also to realize when you have a company that's leading in the industry and you're in an innovative therapy like cell therapy that's not taught, but you actually have to learn it when you get to a company, that your employees are going to be highly sought after from startups. So our biggest thing is, we try to say, how do we stop the leakage while we hire? So we don't have any problems hiring. We get some of the most talented people in the industry, multiple people for each role. But we also, once we've trained people up, have the issue of people leaving for more money, bigger titles, mostly that. And for those companies to want to learn from them. And so it is a dilemma for us. And something that we have to do is really get good at that quick learning and learning agility to make sure that we can get the most out of our employees. And as I think it was Richard Branson, who said, you want to train your employees so they're really good and treat them well so they want to stay. And if you do both of those, we shouldn't have to worry as much about retention. So that's what we're working on, is not just the training them to be excellent, but also treating them really well to try to get them to stay. So I'm happy with our recruitment, and I'd like to have a little less people leave.
Well, that's, I think, not unique to you. When I hear about everything in the Bay Area, how people are moving to company, Boston, same issues. I thought you'll be in a better position here with at least less of competition, but then comes the competition from the smaller companies, the pre-IPO. Tomorrow I'm going IPO. Anybody has something to discuss about retention of employees? David?
Yeah, the retention issue, I think this is sort of, not just a big pharma issue. I think the biotech experiences same kind of turnover and attrition. I mean, the fact is the field is hot. I mean, and when you have a certain skill set, it's highly sought after. So, for those in the audience, especially who are in training, thinking about their career, I mean, this is what's going on in the biotech. There is a lot of opportunity. I think, as an individual employees, I always, when I talk to, in the hiring process or even during the exit interview when someone's leaving, obviously, as a CEO, you try to support the individual's decision to seek their career opportunity elsewhere. But I also give the advice. I mean, you will have to do what you want to do, but at the end, when you think about career, it's not just, you got to think about the long term, not just next year or two where you may be swayed by certain financial, incentives or titles and things like that. But, that's just the one element. I mean, it's really, working with individuals or companies that will develop your career appropriately, for the long term, in terms of how you can not just go from, say, starting position to the next level, but eventually, to much more senior roles in a company, including CEO or the chairman of the board.
Well, in the last few minutes, they tell me, and we have another 4 minutes. In the last few minutes, I really want to touch very quickly on Los Angeles as a potential for a biotech hub. Some of you are very much familiar and working with us to make it happen for many years, and others are sitting there in the Ivory Coast in Boston, San Francisco, and don't understand what it is to build a biotech. We have a biotech. So let me start with you, Levi. How do you view it from the outside? Is there any chance that we recreate the Boston experience and the Bay Area experience in LA?
Yeah, well, first of all, although we're not based in LA, from our standpoint, LA, we're all in California, and LA is a critical part of the overall ecosystem, the healthcare biotech ecosystem in California. And that's because there's already, you've got the critical mass of talent, you've got amazing science there, you've got a healthcare industry that's world-class. And so already, although maybe there's totally not unreasonable to have a vision that there could be a special hub like in Cambridge or the Bay Area, but it's already a hub of innovation in the biomedical sector from our standpoint. So, I guess, as you know, the in addition to those elements of, critical mass of biomedical science and talent, obviously, are the investors, do you have the investor complements that are focusing on LA? And then, of course, back in the old days for some of the other more kind of established ecosystems, there was the commitment from the state and local government to create incentives for companies and labs and et cetera, tax incentives to actually stand things up there. So that would be the other question. But then there's just patience. I mean, these things, it's great. The Bay Area and Cambridge, they are what they are now, but that was a 5-decade journey to get there. So, but the way I see it, I mean, LA is already, it's not like you guys are shorthanded in any way. All the pieces are there, and we consider it a really important part of the California ecosystem.
Okay, that's great. Daphne?
So I've lived as a computer scientist in multiple conversations that ask that exact same question about computing hubs, machine learning hubs. Like, can we build another Silicon Valley, and to a slightly lesser extent, but still pretty dominant in the Massachusetts, Boston area. And there's been multiple attempts to do that. I think part of the challenge, of course, is having that critical mass, the critical mass of venture investors, the critical mass of other companies, because otherwise it ends up being like a one-directional traffic where people leave the area, and then because there's not that many employers in the area, they're hesitant to come back in case that thing doesn't work out and they're going to have to relocate again. So it's possible to do that, but as Levi said, it takes time to build up that internal momentum with enough companies in the local ecosystem to really create more of a gravitational pull that not only brings people in, but keeps them there when they switch jobs, as they inevitably do. I think it's I think as Levi already said, the LA area is definitely a place where there's tremendously exciting science that's happening. So you have one of the key ingredients already there. I know some venture groups have started to make more and more investments in that area. That adds another key ingredient. But it's a multi-year effort to really get that same level of momentum that one sees in the more established hubs.
Great feedback from the outsider. Let's leave Christy for last. David, you've been a hybrid between North and South California.
One thing I would say, I went to MIT in 1978. At that time, Kendall Square, did not exist. Kendall Square was a train stop. You get off and you run as fast to the campus because that was not one of the desirable places. And what happened now? I mean, I think, these things can happen pretty fast. Los Angeles, I do agree, exactly what Levi and Daphne are saying. This is a great place to really create a biotech hub. But it will require coordination, from the city and government, coordination from, large companies. I mean, Gilead already has a pretty good presence. I remember only about 15 years ago, Gilead as an entire company had about 3,000 people. And now, Gilead, Kite Pharma has 2,700. So if you think about it, you are as big as what Gilead was before they went into the hepatitis franchise. So here, I mean, I think it is really, I've been involved, Arie, that, you've been having this discussion for many years about trying to create a biotech hub. It's really, coordination, acceleration, and more commitment. And this is a commitment that needs to come from the government, commitment that needs to come from, academic institutions like UCLA, Caltech, SC, as well as many other ventures who have expressed interest. So there is a great opportunity to accelerate. And frankly, San Francisco, Los Angeles, I mean, I think Los Angeles is, much better suited to really, create a, biotech hub than the small Bay Area where people are struggling with the talent as well as space.
Thanks, David. I would not wait for the government to help us. I'm waiting for Christy at Kite to help us. What can you do for us, Christy?
So, I think it's the most exciting place to be because, it's very condensed.
More than Indiana?
Yes, much more. I think that would take us decades to build that one up. But here in the LA area, you're starting to get you have some of the bigger companies. We'd like to help these small innovative companies, and we'd love to be the partner of choice to help accelerate the innovation, advance the science. And I think it's more exciting here than in some of those other cities where it is I don't want to say more competitive because I love competition, but it's just exciting to be part of a growth area. And especially when you have students like the UCLA students and the multidisciplines that come out of that school, that actually helps us foster the ability to become one of the prime destinations for biotech. So all in.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'm being signaled here to that we are really running over time. There are multiple questions from the audience that I couldn't answer, but hopefully either we'll be invited again and we'll do it again, or we'll work one-on-one. Thank you so much for the panel. I hope you all enjoyed, and hope to see you again. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Arie. Thank you, panel.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.